Dubbed the Panama Papers, a massive leak of over 11 million documents has exposed the secret details of offshore companies used to hide billions of dollars by shady world leaders and anonymous business people. The story of the Panama Papers is being told by the Consortium of Investigative Journalists, a group that includes the Miami Herald, the BBC, Fusion, and the Guardian, and among others. The shoes are already beginning to drop, with the Prime Minister of Iceland resigning after being named in the investigation. Of course, there is a Florida connection too. So joining us to explain this, we welcome Nicholas Nehamas, reporter for the Miami Herald, and Doug Hanks, County Hall reporter for the Miami Herald as well. Nick, why don't you kick it off by talking to the viewers about what the controversy is? So what? People hide money in offshore accounts all the time to avoid taxes. What's the big deal?
Well, the issue here is that we've never really known who is actually hiding the money and why. And nearly 400 journalists around the world were given access to these papers and spent nearly a year analyzing them to see how, owning an offshore company is legal. But because of the secrecy and the opaque corporate structure involved in the companies, they're very susceptible to manipulation, illegal tax evasion, money laundering, and other criminal activity. So we were really given a window into the world's shadow economy and how it works, a world that until now has been completely secret.
Wow, so apart from the moral ambiguity associated with offshore accounts and tax avoidance or evasion, and let's talk about that distinction, apart from that, the information was provided to journalists, or was it leaked?
Yes,
what happened here?
A confidential source leaked it to the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, which then shared it with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, which, as you said, includes the Miami Herald.
And we're talking about a particular law firm here that handled all of this?
Yes, Mossack Fonseca, based in Panama City. It has offices around the world and is one of the top 5 firms that sets up offshore companies.
Yeah, Doug, how do you see it? Are you in any way bothered by the revelations?
Bothered? No. More. I think this is a story that people will talk about in Miami for the next 20 years. I
Really?
mean, this is such a milestone when it comes to such a key source of high-end revenue for the Miami real estate market. I think for better and for worse, I mean, the Miami real estate market bounced back from an historic depression, largely thanks to foreign dollars. The foreign dollars has been such a key insulator to Miami's economy in really bad times that we've gone through. So as we're seeing pressure on that from the Panama Papers at a time when condo sales are getting shaky, you're seeing cash sales continue to drop, this is going to have some short-term consequence, I would think, in terms of investors being skittish as to getting into this market at this moment.
Right, yeah, the really interesting thing for South Florida here is that in the Panama Papers, we at the Herald discovered several people, foreign nationals, linked to corruption in their home countries, buying condos through offshore companies. And, people in South Florida have been talking about illicit money propping up the condo market since the 70s and 80s, and we've seen isolated instances of this playing out in the courts, but this is the first time we have some substantial cases to talk about.
Wow, so it's not just mere conjecture or speculation that this will impact the South Florida economy by way of the real estate market. You really think that this will have direct negative effects?
Well, I think it is conjecture. I mean, it's predicting.
Yeah.
But, the latest Miami condo boom is losing steam. The conventional wisdom seems to be that chapter is ending and that we're now going to go into some sort of slowdown, plateau, maybe a dip. So bad timing for those selling luxury condos to foreign buyers. And a lot of foreign buyers are speculators, investors using these shell companies. Once again, huge global spotlight into Miami real estate and sort of the downside and the dark side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as Doug said, I mean, the Panama Papers come at such a crucial time for the market because there are a lot of economic factors, declining economies in Latin America and Europe, dragging down the Miami market. And last month, the federal government announced that it was targeting Miami-Dade and Manhattan specifically, looking at secret shell companies buying luxury real estate. They're going to start making people in the real estate industry disclose who really own those companies. So the timing of the Panama Papers really could not be worse for the market.
Right. How would that affect or curtail the ability of offshore companies or foreign investors to use cash to buy houses? If they want to use cash, they use cash, and how can we regulate that?
Well, they will
just apart from disclosing them.
They can still use cash, but now they will just have to disclose the beneficial owner of the shell company. So now they're going to have to say who's behind the cash. That's the innovation.
To regulators.
To regulators. It
Not
won't be
public,
public.
yeah.
It'll be disclosed to regulators.
By regulators, you mean federal regulators?
U.S. Treasury Department.
Got you. And they can stop the sale. They can stop the transaction if it's with someone that they don't approve of?
They're using it more as a measuring stick of potential criminal activity. And the speculation from experts is that if they see a lot of suspicious transactions, or if they see transactions slowing down, the federal regulator in charge of this, Jennifer Calvary, compared it to a DUI checkpoint where people turn around before they hit it.
Right.
So we could see this initiative, which expires in August, expanded not just in time, but expanded across the whole country.
This created an awkward moment this week at the Miami-Dade County Commission. Last week, the agenda came out, and there was this fairly routine resolution where a commissioner said, I want us as a body to ask Washington to loosen up this rule that's scrutinizing Miami-Dade County about money laundering, sort of why focus on us? Okay. Sunday, the Panama Papers breaks, worldwide scrutiny. Everyone's looking at Miami real estate and shell games, and then Tuesday, this agenda comes to the meeting, and they pass the resolution. Did not go over well, according to my Twitter feed and what we've seen on social media.
Are they going to walk it back?
Well, I mean, it's passed. I'll be looking for that to see some motion from.
Any public statements from any of the commissioners or anybody from the Miami-Dade County?
Yeah, I mean, there was a debate, and some commissioners saying
after the Panama Papers were
right,
disclosed.
I
that
mean,
means
the commissioners voted against it. Said, "Have you been reading the Miami Herald? This is not good timing." But they said, "Listen, I didn't know the series was coming out. This is separate from that. I think it's a good idea. Let's pass the resolution," and they did.
Wow.
And they're responding to the benefits of foreign money investing in Miami. I mean, it's put Miami on the world stage. It's created construction jobs, more tax revenue. It helped bring the real estate economy back. But, at the same time, Miami's financial institutions report more suspicious activity than any other cities except New York and Los Angeles. So, the city has a target on its back for federal regulators.
So can we go back to the global impact of the Panama Papers then, and can you, Nick, touch upon the distinction between tax avoidance and tax evading and how this sort of implicates many foreign leaders and business people?
Right, so tax avoidance is completely legal. It means that you're using the laws of countries around the world to legally lower the taxes you're obliged to pay. Tax evasion is something different, and that's when you are breaking the law to hide assets and offshore accounts without telling any government around the world that you own this. We saw a big case a few years ago, the Cohen father and son team. They were hotel developers in Miami Beach, Mauricio Cohen-Asor and Leon Cohen-Levy. They were busted for hiding $150 million worth of assets. I mean, Miami Beach mansions, Fisher Island condos, a condo in the Trump Tower, even a helicopter from the IRS, and they did it by moving their assets into offshore accounts that weren't connected to them. Of course, Mossack Fonseca, the firm at the center of the Panama Papers, set up some of these entities in Panama and the British Virgin Islands.
But to Mossack Fonseca's defense, they're saying that they're just avoiding and they're just using the necessary loopholes that are available to them to help their clients.
Well,
right?
Mossack Fonseca says they play a different role. They don't actually handle the money. They set up the companies. Their defense, and their founder, Ramon Fonseca, made this defense on TV a few months back. He compares the firm to a car company that simply makes cars. And then if someone uses one of the cars to commit a robbery, you can't hold the manufacturer responsible, is his argument. So they're saying they create these companies and then they let them go. They are simply the registered agent or a middleman.
Huh. What's your analysis? What's a counterpoint there? Do you agree with that?
The counterpoint is that they're not, from what we saw in the documents, they're not checking who the people are who are actually using the companies. I mean, for example, someone we saw secretly buying real estate in Miami was Paulo Octavio. He's a Brazilian developer who was serving as the vice governor of Brasilia when his boss was filmed taking what police said was a bribe. The governor had to resign, Octavio replaced him, and then was also accused of taking bribes, although never filmed, and also had to resign. he used an offshore company to buy a waterfront condo in Miami for about $3 million. And this firm set up the company for him, but it took them 2 years to figure out who he was and that he'd been accused of corruption and that they needed to do enhanced due diligence searches on him and figure out where his money came from, why he wanted the company. So that's really where Mossack Fonseca seems to have fallen short in realizing who it was setting up the companies for
Sure.
and why they
It's
wanted
a
them.
fascinating question to what extent they can be held responsible, either legally or morally, if indirectly involved in these indeed questionable and, as you put it, opaque transactions offshore. I mean, we are, if once, if not twice, removed with Mossack Fonseca, and I don't know if they can be held liable in any legal way.
I know
but certainly morally it is a bit stinky.
I know there are, the Justice Department has said it's going to look at this, some other criminal investigation agencies around the world, so we will see what happens.
Okay. Doug?
I mean, what a world we're in now, where the elite of the world, their law firm is subject to leaks. You had the Sony hack, where movie stars' emails are being made public. I mean, this would not have been possible with 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Nothing's really safe from disclosure potentially at this point.
But as David Cameron said, who is somewhat sort of at the center of this too, I mean, he wants to weed out the tax evaders. And in order to do so, we need this kind of transparency, this openness within which to sort of discover who is doing what and when and how this sort of impacts local economies and the poor, most of all. So it's not as if it's a bad thing. But
well, I think Nick's story's made the point that this, using the flow of foreign money does compete against local buyers who just want to buy a place to live, right? And if this is an investment vehicle that has some advantage in a money laundering scheme, that's going to drive up the price of that unit. And so that helps cause the income gap here, the inequality gap.
Right, yeah, Miami is now one of the least affordable cities for renters and home buyers in the nation. So, you know, we've seen the upside of foreign investment, but the fast rise in prices caused by it,
very real impact.
Wages have just not kept up for locals, so it's become very hard for people who live here to continue living here.
Sure. So one last point, Nick, if you can close us out with just what do you predict? What's in store? More to come? More to fear?
There are 11.5.
Just scratching the surface, or is there a bigger iceberg, below here, or what's going on?
Absolutely. I mean, there are 11.5 million files in this leak. ICIJ is bringing in new media partners very soon to help analyze the files. So I think we're going to be getting a lot more stories in the next few months and even years. I mean, this is really the biggest leak and the biggest global investigation in the history of journalism.
Okay. Just one quick question for you, Doug, completely unrelated, but I want to know, just because I'm a humanist and an artist and I love all things related to that in Miami. What's going on with the Frost Museum?
Frost Museum got their county-funded bailout this week. It passed easily, 12-1. So as they explain it, Frost should now is on its way to having the money needed to finish construction and have that museum open by November. It needs a big opening. It's got huge projections for attendance to make its budget, and it's not getting the county subsidy it counted on, a $4 million yearly subsidy that instead is being converted into this bailout, essentially.
Right. What are the optics of the bailout in the community, or what's your perception of it?
Well, it's hard to tell as we haven't polled, but I feel like it was a tough lift to make it popular. None or most of the elected leaders who voted for it sort of did so reluctantly. They were upset they were in this position. But I think we'll know, and this was a big message of the vote, in 2 years, if this is a vibrant, popular, essential part of downtown Miami and sort of the life of kids in Miami as the original Science Museum was. People grew up going to field trips there, going to the planetarium and camps there. I'm not sure people really remember.
Do you have any insight on how the Perez is doing?
I think the reports are good.
Okay.
It's
going to be hard for one not to cannibalize the attendance of the other.
Well,
even though they're completely two different
Museum
institutions.
Park sort of gains strength from having two popular places there. The thing to remember is Perez Art Museum needs government support every single day to keep the lights on, or at least to make its budget. Frost Museum right now will not have that. Right. That's going to be the challenge.
Okay. Will they eventually ask for it, you think?
Well, That's the
More to
bigger
come.
question.
Yeah, no, certainly.
Next
Certainly.
show.
Exactly. On that note, gents, thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
And other criminal activity. So we were really given a window into the world's shadow economy and how it works, a world that until now has been completely secret.
Well, so apart from the moral ambiguity associated with offshore accounts and tax avoidance or evasion, and let's talk about the distinction, apart from that, the information was provided. Dubbed the Panama Papers, a massive leak of over 11 million documents has exposed the secret details of offshore companies used to hide billions of dollars by shady world leaders and anonymous business people. The story of the Panama Papers is being told by the Consortium of Investigative Journalists, a group that includes the Miami Herald, the BBC, Fusion.
100 journalists around the world were given access to these papers and spent nearly a year analyzing them to see how owning an offshore company is legal, but because of the secrecy and the opaque corporate structure involved in the companies, they're very susceptible to manipulation, illegal tax evasion, money laundering.
Tony Hall reporter for the Miami Herald as well. Nick, why don't you kick it off by talking to the viewers about what the controversy is? So what? People hide money in offshore accounts all the time to avoid taxes. What's the big deal?
Well, the issue here is that we've never really known who is actually hiding the money and why, and nearly 400...
And The Guardian, and among others. The shoes are already beginning to drop, with the Prime Minister of Iceland resigning after being named in the investigation. Of course, there is a Florida connection too. So joining us to explain this, we welcome Nicholas Nehamas, reporter for the Miami Herald, and Doug Hanks, counter